All right, Professor Purvis, thank you very much for sitting down with me. I usually start this. Actually, you might be entertained by how I usually start this. I usually say, "Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, aliens and DMT entities alike, tuning in from all over the cosmos." Particularly because I think that the world that we consciously experience is very constrained by an idea that you have pushed forward, which is that it is of biological utility. So we only see things that we need to see for survival. We don't see the world in itself. When I was in, I think, fourth grade, my math teacher gave me a box DVD set on string theory, and it was the first time I was exposed to the idea of that the world right in front of me was likely not what it appeared to be. And that idea was just, I mean, to 11-year-old Max, was just unbelievable. I couldn't grasp it. And throughout middle school, throughout high school, I just didn't know what to do with that. I was so amazed that people either didn't know that fact or that people knew that fact and were able to operate in the world as if it wasn't a thing, as if it wasn't a big deal. And so a lot of my, research, a lot of just like my introspection and learning and life journey has been kind of along those same lines of understanding what the world is, understanding kind of what is important to know, understanding how we come to know the things we do. And yeah, I'm kind of at a point, really, I hope this doesn't cut off the conversation, or maybe you can help me through this, coming to the point where it's like, all right, so we don't see the world as it is, right? We don't see the world as it is. We see it in the sense that we need to see it. And we can't fully understand how that kind of transition takes place because we're kind of locked inside our own minds. So I'm kind of left with the question, like, all right, what do we do? Like, what do we do now? Now that we know we can't, now that we know that the world we're interacting with isn't the real world, do we just pretend like it isn't different and just go along like everyone else does? And it's kind of like a wall to me. It kind of feels like a dead end where I don't know how to push further. So that's where I am. That's where I'm coming from. So I've talked for a while. Maybe your turn. So thanks a lot.
I think it really is even simpler than you are making it. So the history of neuroscience really boils down to the idea that the world exists and the visual system and other sensory systems are in the business of extracting the actual features of that world. And that's what we end up seeing by virtue of the process that you allude to from the retina to the occipital cortex and the prior visual system and beyond. The alternative is that, no, that's not the way it works at all, that it's all empirical. It's all by trial and error. And these are two completely different ways of looking at the way in which the brain generates sensory information or generates an idea of what the world is like so that we can survive in it. Let's take a chess game. There's no right move or wrong move. Two computers play each other for millions of games, and they beat all human competitors by virtue of having simply figured out empirically what makes sense to do at a certain point in a certain game. It's not logical at all. Mm-hmm. And there's no way of dissecting the underlying machinery and saying, oh yeah, we're going to be able to explain logically how the computer beats Garry Kasparov or whoever. It doesn't work like that. And that's really crucial to see. And the idea is that, yeah, that's the way the brain works. It's played the game of life for 4 billion years. And by playing the game of life for 4 billion years, it understands what it has to do in certain situations without a logical basis for doing whatever it is that the reaction to a stimulus happens to be. So that's really tough to digest. And of course, nobody likes it, but that's the way it seems to be.
Yeah, that makes sense. That seems like kind of intuitive, honestly. Just like a trial and error, tripping
But
and then standing back up again.
yeah, but try telling that to a vision scientist and you won't get very far. I mean, you can't write a grant saying, oh, we're going to give up what we've been doing for the last 75 years and go down a different pathway and expect to get a grant from a group of vision scientists who've been brought up in the tradition of feature detection. I'm making it very simple, but that's the general idea.
So how do you push farther on that idea of trial and error? Like you said, the core problem was understanding how our brain does this, from my understanding. But then you just said in the deep mind system of learning chess, it's just trial and error. Trying to explain it logically fails. So is there research to be done through this pathway?
Yes. So we have, and people have had for centuries, a good idea of what we see. To take one example of a sensory modality that we're all very wedded to. So whether it's line length, color, geometry, motion,
Sure.
there's a ton of psychophysical evidence about what we actually see, literally what the response of the human brain is to stimuli of all these different categories. If you can explain why we see what we do, then you've proven your point. If you can't, and feature detection can't, then you're no place. So the research that needs to be done is that, okay, take this stuff, take the psychophysical evidence and explain it. If you can explain it empirically, great. If you can't, well, then you're in trouble. And the feature detection history over the last, again, 75 years of neuroscience has been trying to explain it in terms of, yeah, there's a real world out there, and we have algorithmic processes in our brain that extract the features of that real world. That's nonsense. Or at least in my view, it's nonsense. It can't be done. We can't detect the features of the real world. We don't have the measuring instruments to detect the features of the real world. So that's a big challenge. And of course, people aren't happy with that.
And are people not happy with it? So do people just become entrenched in their way of thinking and think they don't want to become invalidated? They don't want to have to admit that the work that they've been doing, an entire field has been doing, and I'm guessing probably close to $1 billion of research funding has been pushed into an avenue that is incorrect. They just don't want to hear that at all.
Of course,
it's human nature. Of course.
Yeah. What else is new?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, if this is right, it's a sea change for people thinking about vision or other sensory modalities, or in general how the brain works. That's not something people want to rush to embrace. Again, as you say, if it contradicts or confounds what they've been working on for 50 years.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So what? And you're saying that the explanation of you said psychophysiological process of how we do the line detection and how we think about color, the explanation of that will be the tipping point that makes the case so compelling that people will have to start.
So that's why I want you to read some of these papers to see if you find the explanation compelling. So the general explanation is it all depends on the frequency of occurrence of stimuli. The more you see a stimulus, whether it's in the domain of luminance or color, geometry, whatever it may, motion, whatever it may be, that you can explain that based on the frequency of occurrence. How many times over billions of years you and your millions of years for human beings, how often your forebears have seen this thing is the reason that we see it in the way that we do. So
sure, yeah.
You have to, I mean, this is evidence. You can't just bullshit and say, well, I think it's this way and take it or leave it. You have to have evidence. So this is the evidence. You take psychophysics and you show that psychophysics can be explained by the frequency of occurrence of stimuli. That's the empirical accumulation, just like the computers that play chess or Go, the same idea.
Like when I'm looking at something in the real world, and I'm thinking through the feature detective feature detection like framework, that's what it feels like to be. Like in the moment, right? In the moment right now, there's this whole scene around me. When I like briefly look around, I open my eyes for 1 second, I see like sets of objects not well defined, then I look longer, and then you get a more detailed, like a further and further detailed picture. So why does that feel so true? Is that just because I've been indoctrinated by this,
Yeah,
or is
sure. I mean, anybody, if you ask anybody, scientists or otherwise, is there a real world out there? And isn't that what we see, hear, and respond to through our senses? They'd say, yeah, of course.
yeah.
So, you have to remove yourself from the obvious, seemingly obvious, to get to what's really happening.
But you're the idea of trial and error and empiricism still presupposes an outside world.
Sure, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, it exists. You measure with physical instruments. So
Yeah.
take a driverless car. The driverless car works because it's measuring with real instruments the surroundings, and Tesla's problems aside, it works pretty well. But that's not the way we're working, and it's hard to sort of assimilate that when it seems obvious that we're seeing the real world the way it is. We don't have any instruments. We don't have rulers, protractors, anything in our visual system or any other sensory system that can measure the world the way a driverless car does. We just don't have that.
It's all trial and error.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hurdles all the way down.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And just over like, because it's happened over such a long time frame, it feels like obvious and easy, but really it's 4 billion years of unsupervised learning of falling and dying that's taken.
That's right.
Interesting. But like, so for like in like for computer vision, like in the case of like a driverless car, like how could you practically apply the trial and error theory? Like would it be like in a simulator? Because like in just like, first when you think about it, when you say, all right, driverless cars should learn to see the world by trial and error, that's a recipe for disaster. But obviously it has to be like kind of pre-trained on trial and error. So
driverless cars are not using trial and error. They're using physical measurements. That's the feature detection. Driverless cars are a premier example of feature detection. There are features in the world. They actually exist physically. You measure them with instruments. It works fine for a driverless car, but we can't do that. We don't have instruments.
Because we have different instruments from the driverless cars.
We don't have instruments at all. We have a different system altogether than the driverless cars. And that's empiricism.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay, so that's why driverless cars work, because they have the
tools, right?
Interesting. So so if that works well enough, I guess like the idea is, I mean, nowadays we're in such like I guess always we're in such a money motivated world. What will actually produce something? Is there a case to be made? Why go through all this research into the trial and error process if we can create tools that have measurement devices that do accurately link up with the outside world? Why even pursue
I mean, we didn't evolve to have those tools. I mean, driverless cars have those tools. Radar, laser, digital cameras, etc. That's the information the driverless car gets. We don't have any of that stuff. We could have evolved, I suppose, to have instruments like that, but we didn't. We don't have anything like that. We have to play the game in a totally different way. So, driverless car, there's nothing wrong with it. The future of entities in the world, maybe it's all going to be, maybe driverless cars are the beginning of the future. Who knows? But what we do now is totally different than what a driverless car is doing.
Interesting.
Empirical versus algorithmic.
Yeah, 100%. I understand what you're saying, at least from a high level. And I'm thinking like further down the line in building you know, on our quest to build artificial general intelligence, something like that, you know, to create like life modeled after us. I'm thinking like if it is like if we were somehow to figure out a process by which to train an agent on a like in an empirical way through a trial and error way. I mean, I guess we already have with the learning, but a more, I guess, more general agent, like it goes back to the like unexplainability and like how do you, I mean, this is obviously like kind of sci-fi and a little bit farther off, but I mean, I think it's maybe it would be a question for 100 years or like, you know, 50 to 100 years is going to be becoming more and more pressing. Like in a trial and error based thing, it's more difficult to shut off. We can't understand what it's actually doing because it's all trial and error based. If we go with the algorithmic,
I think that's too pessimistic. So the Google DeepMind folks have figured out how to win at chess or Go or any game that has a search space that is got so many possible answers that you know, would take literally more than the age of the universe to do it algorithmically. Empirically, from day one, they start getting better, and after 2 weeks of training, they beat Garry Kasparov or whatever.
Sure.
So this is not, you know, it's not nearly as hard as you make it seem. The problem with generating a more general purpose automated brain, if you like, is that it's one thing to just play Go or chess. It's another thing to play the game of life in the real world. You could do it, and I think people will do it, but and it won't take terribly long to do it, but you have to evolve the machine in terms of a real world, not just in terms of a game that's limited to, I don't know, 64 squares on the chessboard.
Is that a more practical way, like, of going about it? Like trying to do the trial and error?
Yeah, I think it's practical. I mean, this is not something I'm any good at, but I think the people who are into, you know, games and games that involve not just playing chess, but playing in an environment that is typical of a lot of computer games that kids play. Yeah, do it, but you've got to evolve a brain based on that kind of experience, and you can generate that pretty quickly with the computational setup. So it's not, I mean, we're not talking about hundreds of years here.
Yeah, I mean, there's already systems that can play those like kind of complex multiplayer games. I'm pretty sure really like that can beat all human players, even in like you said, the search space. Like, is the search space the 64 squares? Like when the search space becomes kind of when you're optimizing for kind of a ton of different things, or maybe you're not optimizing for a ton of different things. You're optimizing for winning the game, whatever that means, or survival, or reproducing, like in the human case. But you have to take in so many different things. Like there's already systems that can do that. So is the step beyond that just giving it a body and letting it connect to the outside world?
It doesn't need a body. I mean, that I don't think it needs a body per se. What it needs is to operate in an environment that, instead of being, you know, one of the Atari games or something like that, that's a realistic environment, like many of the video games that kids play or adults play, that, you know, it challenges you to survive in a very complex environment, not in the relatively simple environment of chess or Go or any other Atari, you know, whatever the game may be. So I think it's perfectly possible, and not as daunting as one might seem. The body issue is a whole other ball game. I mean, that's how you think about that is a different bailiwick.
Yeah, there are already companies building. I mean, like you've seen the videos of the Amazon factories of of robots really being able to automate so much away. I mean, like as you said, that's a whole nother thing. But I don't know, linking these systems with bodies. I mean, it seems like it could replace so many workers or whatever. That's like going to be the headline in the news. Already
Yeah.
is that.
Yeah, I doubt that that's going to be a terribly hard problem. And as you say, witness what's already happened. I mean, the robots that are building automobiles and such are doing the job very well. They're doing a limited job, to be sure, but extending that to operations that are more or less what our bodies do, be done.
Mhm. Interesting. Well, even I mean, I'm totally gonna read like the thing you sent over. Thanks for that. But even just understanding your like the distinction. I mean, the trial and error. I mean, makes sense in like I guess the larger context of the brain, not just in the visual system. I mean, it goes back to your work. I mean, I wasn't able to find any of the work really you did before 15 years ago that got you like kind of accepted into this upper echelon of academia, which is I don't really understand how that world works. But I read somewhere it was for neuroplasticity. That idea, I mean, neuroplasticity, I'm sure is a prerequisite for the empirical process that takes place.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's where my two lives come together
So what was the
very much.
so what was the I mean I don't know if you can go back that far, want to go back that far, but is there like what was the pre and post versions of the understanding of how the brain worked in your the first part of your career, I guess.
The first part was straight up neuroscience. The second part is extending neuroplasticity and the understanding of how the brain changes and why to a more interesting domain.
And the
So,
more interesting domain was vision and sound.
yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be vision and sound, but they're the obvious ones that, you need a lot of information, empirical information about psychophysics. What do people see? What do they hear? You need to prove your case by explaining those psychophysical phenomena, what we see, what we hear, explained in empirical terms.
So is the negative effect of not pursuing the empirical testing, if that is really the case, is the negative, like what are the negative effects of that? Is that just not like in the case that it is true, but that we can build technology and operate in the world like without understanding that it's true? Are there negative consequences? Is the negative consequence just being wrong about our theory of the brain?
Well, I mean, the negative consequences, like anything else in science. I mean, you make progress by having the right ideas and pursuing them. In this case, the right ideas would be empirical basis for information input into human beings, other animals, artificial systems, and progressing on that basis, or languishing in the feature detection realm, which people are still kind of hung up on, and getting nowhere. I mean, it'll change. It's changing, but this is science. It changes slowly. People are wedded to their ideas. If you're a history of science buff at all, there are many examples of where people have been stuck with an idea for 100 years that hasn't gone anyplace. Take, for example, the theory of ether in physics, that the universe is filled with stuff that carries waves, and that was what it was all about. And of course, Einstein showed that wasn't what was going on at all, or Michelson and Morley showed that in physics in the late 19th century. So things move slowly, but they move, and it'll move. I mean, things don't stay stuck for very long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, it's way above my pay grade. I really don't understand, but I do like learning about it. I guess just for the sake of learning about things, like this whole world of the interaction and kind of the clash of the theories between quantum mechanics and general relativity being formulated into some type of theory of like loop quantum gravity that and operating in like multi-dimensional space. Those ideas are really interesting to me. Um, but again, I guess like a question that all of us grapple with and is at the very heart of this distinction problem that we're having is like, truth versus practicality. I guess for me, like a practical life doesn't need that full understanding. So like, what would you say to someone that doesn't see like the value in I guess the scientific like I kind of feel like, well, I guess I'm not deeply involved in the scientific process, like in academia, but even just from like a general standpoint of like my generation or really just the people I interact with, people are very much focused on like what is good for them, not like the truth in and of itself.
That's human nature. I mean, one lives with that, but to my way of thinking, I mean, science is what it's all about. I mean, you can get mired down in all the issues that human nature is burdened with and waste your life, and most people do. But, if you pursue science and make some contribution to it, that's of lasting value. Seems to me you're much too smart a guy to go into business.
I think that the more money you have, the more change you can make. Like, I guess, like on an individual level, like going to do something, like going to build wells or something in Haiti or Africa or in the U.S. I'm sure. I mean, I don't know. Versus like having a ton of money and being able to employ hundreds of thousands of people to do that same process. Like it's like effective altruism. Like my whole idea of money is well, one, to buy myself a level of freedom where I don't have to be bound to do things that I don't want to do or don't find interesting, or work jobs that aren't interesting. So one, to give myself that freedom and give my family that freedom, but also like as the engine of change. I feel like through business, through technology, through investing in projects that are pursuing high meaning objectives, that seems to be like the most effective way to go about positively contributing at like at the highest level, or in like at the large scale.
Okay, well, I guess I basically disagree with you. I mean, my sense of contributing at the highest level is to do something in science. So if you take Bill Gates, for example, or any major player in the high end of rich people, yeah, sure. I mean, Bill Gates does good things with his money, but it's compare Bill Gates to Einstein. There's no comparison.
I don't know. I think there's a case to be made that, well, I mean, what metric are we measuring this on? Influence, like touch, like I'd say way more people are affected by Microsoft devices than affected by the like general theory of relativity.
Yeah, I mean, there's an argument to be made for what you're saying, that giving everybody a laptop is more important than educating everybody about relativistic physics. But I don't know. I think people will forget about Bill Gates very soon, and Einstein will be around for a very long time.
What do you think is going to be like, what type of problem will be the person who contributes the most over the next like few hundred years? Well, I mean, obviously in your perspective, it's going to be a scientist. Is it like, what problem are they going to solve who's going to be the most remembered person, and for what, over the next few hundred years? Obviously we have no idea, but like obviously we have no idea. But like,
yeah. I think that's
Well,
good. I wouldn't even speculate on that. I mean, I think anybody who makes a major scientific breakthrough is going to be remembered for a long time, and the impact of that breakthrough is going to be important forever. Whether it's Newton or Einstein or Darwin, I mean, take your choice. These things are there forever, and you know they are, I think, not to be compared with the contributions of the very rich people who make a billion-dollar contribution to some university or whatever it may be. I mean, it's two different things. I mean, I'm not saying it's wrong not to
sure,
use
yeah,
your
it is two different. Yeah,
money wisely, but the greater impact, if you like to think about it that way, is making a scientific contribution.
interesting. Yeah, I mean, I guess that, I mean, that obviously makes sense, like from the context of your career. I guess I don't know. I don't see that. I don't see that route for myself necessarily. So I hope I can still do something meaningful. Or like my greatest good would be to empower the person that can make those scientific breakthroughs. Because I did a research assistant position at a neuroscience lab at Georgetown. It was the lab for relational cognition, something like that. And I don't think the scientific life is cut out for me. It was so slow. It was so
Yeah, I mean,
slow. And I was just like, I was running trials on patients, and I might maybe did it for 4 or 5 months, and I just saw like really nothing going on. And I was just like, I don't know, it didn't do enough for me. And I understood
well,
how
you're right. I
valuable.
mean, nothing was going on. So, that's dead end science. Um, I think, with your ambition and your smarts, you're probably right to make money and put that money to some use where you think it's going to do some good for the world in general. Uh, you probably are not cut out to be a sit around thinking about, relativity or whatever it may be. So it's not bad. It's just who you are.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I want to have something. I want to have Max Labs, which is basically just like, kind of a venture capital firm, but like get a little bit more connected with the projects going on. So I mean, like, I just think it would be so cool to be able to fund smart people working on, it's kind of like Elon Musk's company. I think it's called like X or Breakthrough Moonshot, something like that, where he's basically just been able to fund all these kind of asymmetric ideas that are, really long shot moonshots. I mean, whatever type of research really interests you, I think that would just be like such a cool thing to be able to do.
Yeah, but yeah, sure. It is a good thing. I mean, I think the problem is that when you come to think of where you're going to throw your money, and where the moonshot should be, I mean, for a lot of people, the moonshot is curing cancer. Total waste of time. I mean, it's just a misunderstanding of what cancer is and what human disease is. And, you got to pick your moonshot carefully and have it be something that is going to really work and be worth the investment, and not some, just giving more grants to people who are going to do, one more piece of the puzzle. I mean,
Yeah. Wait.
cancer is a good example.
Yeah. Why is that a good example?
Alzheimer's is another good.
Okay.
Well, take Alzheimer's.
Yeah. Let's do
Alzheimer's
it.
is a very good example.
My grandfather had Alzheimer's, and I wasn't really able to
Yeah,
really
yeah. Well,
have the type of
we
meaningful
live
conversation.
long.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So we all have Alzheimer's. We live long enough. So, Alzheimer's is not a disease like pneumonia or diabetes. It's just a byproduct of aging. So we all get stupid the older we get. And I'm 85, and I'm a whole lot stupider than I used to be. And I realize that every day. So you can't avoid aging and death and stupidity that goes along with age. But to think you can solve, and that's basically what Alzheimer's is. I mean, you can talk about all of the proteins that are abnormal and so on. But basically, it's old age, and we're all suffering from it in one way, shape, or form. So you don't want to throw your money at that. You don't want to throw your money at something that is not really going to pay off in a meaningful way. And I think Alzheimer's is a great example of that. Billions, and literally billions and billions of dollars. And there's not a scintilla of worthwhile research that's come out of that.
Interesting, because I know I spoke with someone. I didn't record the conversation, but it was someone in the, aging. So I learned all about cellular senescence and, telomere shortening and how that contributes to aging. And it seemed like there maybe was some progress being made, with stem cells or whatever. I don't really even I don't remember like the full extent of the conversation. But so are you saying that those problems like are just unsolvable? Like is aging to you an unsolvable problem? Because a lot of people don't think it's a solvable problem, I think.
Well, they're welcome to their thoughts, but we age for a reason. I mean, if we didn't age and die, you wouldn't be here. So it's much better to get rid of the old farts and let the new generation have a go at it. That's the biological purpose of aging. Alzheimer's is a small part of that, but you don't want to solve the problem of aging. I mean, that's nonsense. People get old, they die for a good reason. And you wouldn't be here if that wasn't the case.
So have you accepted that?
Am I what?
Like, have you accepted death?
Of course. I mean, who in their right mind wouldn't?
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. I wrote a book one time about this kid. I became interested in the Soviet Union from like 1920 to 1960, and just how people could get snatched up at random and prosecuted on crimes they didn't commit, and just die at any instant. So I wrote a book kind of first person, a 20-year-old kid that said something, Stalin's not the greatest, or yeah, right, or something like, in an offhanded thing, and then was like, all right, then guards come to his house and it says, all right, you have a month to live. We're going to come because of the high status your father holds. You have a month to kind of, do whatever. And then we're going to come take you away, whatever, put you in the gulag, kill you, whatever. So I feel like that kind of just thinking about that kind of like made me have to grapple with it. And I think I'm like pretty chill with it. I guess probably for similar reasons. It's just what happens. You can't stop it. You got to accept the things but people make it seem like this fear of death is always promoted as like the thing that everyone has. But when I talk to people, I don't find that people really say they have like a big fear of death.
It's not true. I mean, of course, when you're young, you feel death. When you have little kids, you feel terribly anxious about their well-being. Mm-hmm. But that's just, it's not what it's all about, really. So anyway, that's my take on it.
Yeah. Is there any, are you like, I guess like, because like from my perspective now, like you were just saying, like, have kids, do something more with your life, whatever, that's like the ultimate meaning or whatever. Before I go, I would be like, I am fine with going. I just would be like, damn, like, I kind of wish I think I like having kids probably would be the only real thing that I guess that's like the thing that like is most important, just having kids and continuing on and that kind of thing. So at your point, is there anything else that you want to do? Is there like, I mean, like when you like, because one day I'm going to be old and I'm going to have had kids and, gave a lot of love and hopefully done, something semi-meaningful and impactful. Is there like, do you just sit around and think and wait for it? Or do you kind of just like accept it?
Yeah.
And just try to live and love?
At 85 with a couple of fatal diseases that are not bothering me too much, but are going to kill me in the next very few years, I'm cool with that.
Wow.
I had my chance.
That's dope.
So you'll feel the same way when you get to be old.
That's dope.
But anyway, it's been fun talking to you.
Yeah, it's fun
And
talking to you too. Thanks a lot.
I will send you something that summarizes the sort of empirical stuff briefly. You can look on my website and find every old paper that I've written and every book and so on. So you don't have to feel like you can't find any of this stuff, but it's all available.
Okay, cool. Yeah. All right, great. Yeah, thanks a lot. I'll definitely dive into that. I mean, honestly, like for me, and understanding the visual system in detail, as you probably understood throughout like the course of the conversation, isn't my life work. It's kind of just like an aspect of the larger picture of, understanding, who we are and understanding how you can be valuable. That kind of larger picture.
It's good. It's good. And I wish you well. You'll probably do very well in this. You'll be another Bill Gates. That's fine.
Yeah, but is there anything Bill Gates is missing? Like, is that like just do good, just love people? Like, it's super simple, right? Just love people, try to work on things that you find meaningful and impactful. Have kids, try to promote good values. And just be grateful and just kind of accept.
I think that's the best one can do.
All right, I like that. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Yeah, send me that over and I'll give it a read.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nice meeting you.